clipping just a teeny bit.
Good morning, and welcome to worship with the community of the First Unitarian Church of Omaha. My name is Shari Woodbury, and it's my great pleasure to be here as your settled minister, and really a great pleasure to have people both on the screen and here in the sanctuary. A special welcome to those who may join us as visitors today. It's wonderful to be with people who have gathered in all of the ways that we are coming together. First Unitarian Church of Omaha is a community of many genders and sexualities, a community of diverse cultural and racial and class backgrounds, a community of varied abilities and gifts, as well as all ages. Some here find inspiration in the great books, others still in the great outdoors, and others in great conversation, often with one another. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this gathered community. I want to give a special shout out to our tech team today, who is helping us make this leap to multi-channel worship. They've spent many hours in the sanctuary here in the last few weeks, and there's more to come, as we'll be in experimentation mode for some time to come. A special thanks to Dr. Rudi Mitchell, our guest, for joining us today. I'll share a bit more about him before he delivers the sermon. I also want to thank John Papan, who is here with us this morning. He generously shared with us his input to develop a land acknowledgement, which you'll hear today. We appreciate both of these individuals sharing their time and their perspectives with us so generously. I think it's always a good time to move toward right relationship, but it's especially fitting that we begin a practice now that honors our relationships to the place where we live and worship, and to the peoples who first called it home. After all, our theme for the month of October is Cultivating Relationship. Tomorrow is also Indigenous Peoples Day, celebrated statewide for the first time in Nebraska this year. Yeah. I share with you this recognition. We acknowledge and honor that where we meet for worship as the First Unitarian Church of Omaha is the land of the Omaha Oto nations, and that Indigenous people in the greater community have become marginalized and made invisible. May we recognize their presence among us and work with them to resolve the issues of poverty, displaced children, and murdered and missing Indigenous women, the MMIW. You'll hear a bit more about land acknowledgements later in the service. For now, let's settle in with a prelude from Stan Harper. Words of Monica Jacobson Tennyson. What is it that calls you here, that calls you onward, that calls you inward, that leads you homeward? What is it that gives you the power to make that change, to ask that question, to take the journey? What is it that says you have done well, that asks you to learn more, that brings you to stillness, that holds you up in hard times? It is relationship, the beating heart of our faith. It begins when we share this hour, our truths, this air, our hearts. Come, let us worship together. And this morning, I'm going to ask one of our ushers to come and light the flame of community for us here in the sanctuary. Those of you who have your own candles or chalices at home may wish to light them as well. And I'm realizing now I forgot to ask one of them this before the service, so they're responding spontaneously. Thank you, Mary. If you've learned the words, you can say them with me. We light this chalice, lamp of our heritage, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. Thank you, Mary, and thanks to all of our volunteers for helping to make this Sunday come together. And now for our eighth principle moment. Recently, we've begun occasionally sharing an eighth principle moment in worship, as we take time this year to explore what the eighth principle might mean for our congregation if we engage with it. The proposed new addition to our 7 principles is about journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. It invites us to do this work by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. For our eighth principle moment today, I simply want to invite you to consider a few questions as we go through this service, and we'll include them in the e-blast later as well. How has our national and local history of colonialism shaped our church's relationship to the native peoples of this land? What relationships and skills might we want to grow in order to move toward a spiritually whole relationship with Indigenous people in the Omaha area today? What might we need to unlearn or dismantle in ourselves and our institutions in order to move toward a spiritually whole relationship with local Indigenous people? And as we work to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community within this church, how might we honor the cultural heritage, spiritual needs, perspectives, and gifts of our own members and visitors with Native backgrounds? So let's live with those questions for a while, and perhaps you'd even like to discuss them with each other after the service. Now we come to a time in our service for care and centering. Reaching out with your joys and concerns helps draw our community closer together. I didn't have any items. Actually, I had one item submitted in advance that I'll share with you first, and then feel free. I've got a few here that were written up by folks who came in. We're going to have this as an ongoing thing for those who are coming in person to the service. There are forms at both doors you could fill out if you'd like to have a joy or concern shared during the service. You can continue to submit them online beforehand as well. And of course, for those on Zoom, we'll continue. Feel free to put something in the chat right now. Let's see. One we learned about recently, Caben Thomas is recovering from a significant injury. He'll be starting outpatient physical therapy 3 days a week for 3 months or more, so he's got a road ahead of him. He had to take a leave of absence from his doctoral music program to accommodate this. So you can understand that's been difficult and discouraging for Caben. Our positive thoughts, good wishes, and cards are all appreciated, and we'll include his address in Lincoln in the e-blast if you'd like to send a card. I also want to take a moment to celebrate that we have a new staff member of the First Unitarian Church of Omaha, Oliver Kaufman. Come on up, Oliver. And if you wouldn't mind taking your headphones off for a moment and coming up into the webcam, let's let the folks on Zoom see who's behind the soundboard too. We're so grateful to have our new technology coordinator to support this multi-channel age of church we're moving into. Oliver Kaufman. Okay, let's see. Carrie Helmberger, so happy to be back at the church with all of you fabulous people. I second that emotion. Okay, let's see what's come in on the chat. Nick Wigg is excited that he finally gets to see his mom today for a birthday celebration. That's great, Nick. And Malia's son, Evan Soley, will marry Courtney Tabor next Saturday. How exciting. Terry Lynn would like to thank the Ponca tribe for the transportation they provide her. I am so grateful, she says. Thank you, Terry Lynn. It's wonderful to know about these things in one another's lives so that we can share in the joy and let it be multiplied, and also reach out to those who are facing hard times. So thank you for sharing those things in your own life when you're moved to do so. Please know also that as your minister, I'm always glad to connect with people one-on-one, as are many other caring people in our congregation. Okay, let's pause for a moment. Let's take a minute just to be aware of how we are in community. If you're on Zoom, you might want to page through those faces and names on your screen. If you're in the sanctuary, you might want to look around and see who else has joined you here in the sanctuary. What a beautiful community. With gratitude, let us enter now a time of contemplation. I'll begin with a common prayer from Lynn Cox before we enter a quiet period for your own private meditation or reflection. And as we begin, feel free to rest your eyes if you like. You might want to place a hand gently on your heart and just turn inward in whatever way feels right to you. Spirit of life, who draws us together in a web of holy relationships, make your presence known with us and in us and among us. Remind us that we are not alone in history. Ignite us with the courage of the living tradition. Remind us that we are not alone in entering the future. Anchor us with patience and perseverance. Remind us that we are not alone in our times of grief and pain. Comfort us with your Spirit, manifest in human hands and voices. Remind us that we are not alone in joy and wonder. Inspire us to honor and extend the beauty we find in this world. Divine music of the universe. Let our hearts beat in diverse and harmonious rhythms, cooperating with an everlasting dance of love. May we move with the rhythms of peace. May we move with the rhythms of compassion. May we move with the rhythms of justice. Source of stars and planets and water and land, open our hearts to all of our neighbors. Open our souls to a renewal of faith. Open our hands to join together in the work ahead. So be it. Blessed be, and amen. And let us continue in silence together until I ring the bell. Our Share the Plate recipient for the month of October is the Food Pantry at Clare Memorial United Methodist Church, our sister church. There are several ways to help with the pantry, which helps the surrounding area in North Omaha. You can donate food. Donations of canned goods, together with spaghetti and more, will be welcomed between 10 and 1 at Clare this Thursday for the pantry taking place on Saturday next weekend. This is a monthly event that our members support as we can, helping with nutrition in the area. You can donate money. Those on Zoom will see the donation link for the Clare Cares Food Pantry pop up in the text, in the chat. Those in person are invited to use either one of the boxes that are at the entrances of the sanctuary as you come and go, or if you would like, during the offertory music, you can bring money up and put it into the basket here in front. Note that gifts made in person will be shared between the food pantry and the church unless you indicate otherwise. So if you're meaning to make a gift to First Unitarian, such as for your pledge, you can indicate that on the memo line of a check or use one of the envelopes that's there in the pew in front of you. And a third way you can help, besides food donations and monetary support, is by volunteering in the food pantry. This indoor activity at Clare is a good opportunity for healthy adults under age 60 who are not pregnant or living with a medically vulnerable person. For more information, please contact Mark Luskatoff from our congregation's sister church team. I invite you to give with a generous heart as you are able, and let's enjoy some offertory music from Stan. I'd like to share with you today the story of the chickadee person. The version I have comes from the book All Our Relatives, Traditional Native American Thoughts About Nature by Paul Goebel, forward by Dr. Joe Medicine Crow. It is a story from the Absaroka people, part of the Crow Nation. And it goes like this. Plenty Coups, chief of the Absaroka people, received direction in life when he was young. He had sought a vision, fasting and praying for 4 days and nights on a lonely hilltop. The sought-after dream came, and in his dream, he saw the four to strike a forest. He felt pity for the trees and all the things that lived in the forest. But the four winds struck with such terrible force that only one single tree, a tall and straight pine, was left standing amidst the piles of broken and scattered trees. Plenty Coups heard a voice speak to him. Listen, Plenty Coups, in that tree is the lodge of the chickadee. He is least in strength, but strongest of mind among his kind. He is willing to work for wisdom. The chickadee person is a good listener. He never intrudes, never speaks in a strange company, and yet never misses a chance to learn from others. Avoids failure by learning how others succeeded and failed. The voice went on, everybody likes him because he minds his own business, or pretends to. Develop your body, Plenty Coups, but do not neglect your mind. It is the mind that leads a man to power, not the strength of the body. Plenty Coups always sought to follow the ways of the chickadee, leading his people wisely during the terrible times when the buffalo herds were killed and his people forced to live in the white man's ways. And that is the story of the chickadee person. Stories like this one open themselves up to different meanings for different listeners at different times. I'll be curious to learn what others hear in it today. I hear an invitation to be like the chickadee person, to listen well. Don't miss a chance to learn from others and thus grow in wisdom. Today, as we seek to cultivate relationships of caring and respect, we have the opportunity to listen to a wise leader, long devoted to his people. Dr. Rudi Mitchell is an enrolled member of the Omaha Nation of Nebraska and Iowa. He is a retired professor of Native American Studies at Creighton University. Prior to his teaching at Creighton University, he dedicated his life to working with the 3 Indian tribes in Nebraska. He has worked in the area of human services in social work, mental health, and education. He is a former Omaha tribal chairman and is a direct descendant of Chief Big Elk of the Omaha Nation. Now, Dr. Mitchell says he is retired, but I gather he keeps pretty busy in retirement. He mentioned as we were planning that there's a big national Indian convention happening in Omaha this coming week that he is a part of. Very exciting for our city to support that in some way. I know recently he was also at the newly named Big Elk Lake in Sarpy County, named in honor of his ancestor and holding a cedar ceremony for that occasion. And he's got 1 or 2 other speaking engagements he's going off to today after this one. So I mention all this just to let you know that he probably could have been many other places this morning. And I'm especially grateful that he's with us on this day in October around Indigenous Peoples Day and sharing some of his life and his wisdom and some information about the peoples of this area with us. So deep thanks to you, Dr. Mitchell, for being with us and helping us build relationships with integrity and care. And welcome into our pulpit, Dr. Rudi Mitchell.
Aho wangeda uda diati wishti uda atiho Omaha ijaja wiwita sihituba wake ijaja wiwita Dr. Rudi Mitchell in Kesabe ede mabdeho Omaha ede mabdeho. In keeping up with my cultural tradition as an elder, we're asked to speak in our native language when we address people, and I did this today. I'm not a fluent speaker. I can speak in phrases. I'll get a little bit into the language later on in my talk to you, but I wanted to address you all in my Omaha language. I give you my Indian name, my English name. I belong to the Buffalo Clan, and I'm a member of the Omaha Indian Nation. I want to start off with a prayer, in our culture, with all the events and that we do, whatever it's, family, a meal, big social event, our business meeting, we always start off with a word of prayer because we're a very spiritual people. And I want to ask you to stand, as Native people, we always face east where the sun comes up, and you don't have to face east if you don't want to, but those who cannot stand, welcome just to sit as well. But I'm going to offer a word of prayer. I'm going to start off in my Omaha language, then finish in English. Daddy ho wakanda jenaho Jesus, wangedam ati daddy ho, wangedam layakte, wangedam ati daddy ho, sham Omaha mati, sham ukita ajakti ati daddy ho. Father, as we come today to offer a word of prayer on the Sabbath day, we ask that you would bless each and every one of us that are here today, to bless our families, our extended families, and the many friends that we have wherever they may be. Father, I pray for world peace today among all the nations throughout the world. And Father, every morning when I pray, I always ask you if you would help us on the virus that's afflicting so many people throughout the world, that you may eradicate it, that those who are sick with it, that they recover and become well. And Father, be with those who lost loved ones, Father. We pray that their soul may go on to heaven and to be with you up there. Again, Father, thank you for letting us come together. And after we depart today in the four winds, you ask that you continue to be with us and to guide us and help us in our daily lives. And we ask this in your Son's name. Amen. Thank you. I was asked to, well, first of all, I want to thank Reverend Shari and the congregation for asking me to come and share with you some thoughts and reflections as far as Native Americans, some of my personal views, and all this. My views do not necessarily reflect the whole Native American population, nor the Omaha tribe, but these are my views, how I look at the world today. So I ask you to, bear with me. Maybe some of my comments may not be appropriate, but I wanted to share from my heart. I'm 81 years old. I'm an elder. Many of my people don't live to be, my age, 81. I remember about 15, 20 years ago when I was working in the area of mental health, the average age for mortality rate for Native Americans on the Omaha Reservation was around 49, 50. So I'm well beyond that, and I thank my higher power for letting me, live this long and to be able to be part of the world yet. I'm so grateful each morning when I pray. I thank you for letting me survive another day and to be part of this world again. But again, like I said, I want to thank the congregation for letting me be here today and to share with you. The Land Acknowledgement, like I said, I'm an Omaha tribal member. I've been in Omaha about 12 years now. I moved from the Omaha Reservation to come down to be close to three of my sisters who are left of a family of 8. 2 still live here in Omaha. 1 moved to Albuquerque to be with her children, but 2 of them are older than me, and I've got a younger sister, 2 years younger than me. But I wanted to be closer with them, so I moved. I gave up my home on the Omaha Reservation. I've got a great nephew that lives there. I love it here in Omaha. I'm involved in so many different activities. I try to be involved in my Omaha people to help in various ways, even though I'm retired. I've had some background in which I can help, but as you can see, when you get older, you start slowing down, and that's what I've been doing, but I still try to be active as much as I can. You know, I've driven by this church many times, and it's so nice to come in here and actually see the sanctuary here, you know. I remember several years ago, there was a building called the Clarinda that was near here, and I remember how the groups of people tried to save it, and I thought, that's historical, but, you know, the city wants to, you know, whatever they want to do, they have that power, you know, to do that. But I'm so glad the church has survived here. Just several hundred feet from here at the Midtown, you know, with the large condominiums here, my Omaha people had an encampment there. And the circle of the condominiums represent the circle that my Omaha people, once we camped in a circle, and all the 12 clans had a position in the circle. Today we don't observe that, but we still have what is called the hulaga. It's our sacred circle. But each time I've been to the jazz on the green, each time I sit there, I reflect. I think of all my elders, those who have gone before me. A lot of their spirits may still be here, because this land right now, where we're at right now, the Omaha is occupied, you know, for living, for hunting, you know, for survival and all that. My great-great-great-grandfather, Chief Big Elk, stood on the shores of the Missouri River in Bellevue, south here, and embraced actually the first immigrant that came here to Nebraska, which was probably a French fur trader many hundreds of years ago. So we as Omaha people have a great history here in the city of Omaha. And the city, you know, was named after us. The real true pronunciation is Omaha. It's not Omaha, it's Omaha. And even the word Nebraska comes from the Omaha word meaning flat waters. Ni is water, and Braska is flat. And the true pronunciation is Nebraska, and it's from the Platte River that's south of here. I want to acknowledge the Oto, Missouri, as Reverend Shari was saying. You know, they were here at one time. I remember back in 2000, I was appointed as a representative of the Omaha tribe to be on the Lewis and Clark Commission, because in 2004 they celebrated the bicentennial of Lewis and Clark when they did their travels from St. Louis to the Northwest. And Lewis and Clark had stopped here in Omaha, and at that time, the Oto, Missouri were in the old market, and they had earth lodges there. So the Oto, Missouri have a great part as far as, you know, the city of Omaha being here. They were primarily south of the Platte River, and the Omahas were north of the Platte River. The tribes all got along with each other. They knew their hunting areas, and they tried not to impede on each other's hunting areas. The Omahas were considered to be one of the most peaceful tribes in Nebraska. We've never waged war or skirmishes with the U.S. government. And today, you know, our motto is Heritage for Peace. And we have a war bonnet as our symbol, and underneath that it says Heritage for Peace. But there were 20 other tribes that had some contact with the state of Nebraska. I'm not going to name all of them, but the 4 tribes that are here in Nebraska right now, besides the Omaha and the Northern Ponca, are the Santisou and the Winnebago tribe in Nebraska. Now the Ponca were part of the Omaha at one time, and they split off from the Omaha several hundreds of years ago. So right now they're a separate tribe, although their language is very similar to ours, and they have very few speakers left in the state of Oklahoma. The Northern Ponca got terminated in the 1960s. The U.S. government had a termination policy in the 1960s, and the Ponca, along with other tribes, were terminated. They were no longer considered Native Americans. That must have been very hard for Indian people, especially those tribal members, to realize, who am I now today in all this? But in the early 1990s, they were reinstated as a tribe. And today, they no longer have their reservation land because it was all, sold and given, sold to other people. But they have what is called service areas. And the Northern Ponca here in the city of Omaha have an outpatient clinic south of here. And according to their records, there's like 170 different tribes here in the city of Omaha, including Alaska Natives, and probably roughly between 10 and 12,000 Native people that actually reside here in the city of Omaha. We as city people don't actually live in one certain area. We're scattered throughout the city. I live in the northwest part of Omaha. I'm very fortunate. I live in the Ponca tribe have a elderly complex, and I'm fortunate to live in one of their units there. But if I don't visit my neighbors, I never see Native Americans, at all. So, and I'm sure this is true for other Native Americans who live here in the city of Omaha. We don't have what is probably identified as a central place, an agency, or a center where we can go and gather or be together and all this, The city at one time did have Indian centers here in Omaha, but, fundings were exhausted, and there's no longer a place that we can identify as, a place where we can go. So as a result, we're losing our culture. A lot of our traditions, our languages are in jeopardy now. With my own Omaha people, I would say there's probably about a handful, 5 people that speak the language fluently. Mr. John Papan, who's in the audience here, his father was a fluent speaker, and probably the last male fluent speaker here in the city of Omaha. My 2 sisters live here in Omaha. They speak the language fluently, but they're all elders now. Probably in 10 or 15 years from now, we're no longer going to have any fluent speakers. And people ask, why isn't this being taught? It is being taught in Head Start, grade school, and high school. But if a lot of young people, they have other, things they want to do, hobbies or other activities they want to do, and they don't take the language seriously. And if you've taken a foreign language, we don't like to refer our language as foreign. We like to refer them as domestic languages. Languages are difficult. And I remember growing up from a family of 8 as 4 youngest ones, the 3 youngest ones, my mother never taught us the Omaha language. She taught us English first. The 5 older ones, she taught the Omaha language. But once you learn a language at a very young age, you always return it. But throughout the years, I've tried to teach myself, from books, from tapes. And like I said, it's a difficult language to learn. I have one sister that tries to teach the language to any age group here in the city of Omaha. So we're making some effort, but it's a really losing effort, in the languages. And someday a lot of tribes, will no longer have languages. At one time when I was at Creighton, there was something like 400 different languages. And I think today there's less than 40 Native American languages that are being trying to be revived. So, when we look at culture as far as, the land acknowledgement, it's really sad to see as far as us losing, a lot of the culture. I remember growing up on the reservation when I was a small child, and I used to share this at Creighton. As many of you know, Creighton's a middle class, upper class university. You have to have a lot of money to go to school there. I remember 99% of my students knew nothing about Native Americans. The very first day I tell them, put on a sheet of paper, what do you know about Native Americans? And the answers I'd get back were nothing, saw them on TV, maybe a movie, but they never had any contact with Native Americans. So I had to start from ground zero and, trying to educate them as far as Native Americans, and I enjoyed teaching. I wish if I was younger, I would have stayed. I was 73 at the time, and I wanted to retire because I wanted to enjoy life. And today I would say I just want to be lazy because I worked so many years and all this, But like I said, the culture is something that I just feel that we could, hopefully someday the young people would take a grasp. I know when I'm asked to do some of the cedar ceremonies with modern technology, people will call me or text me, and I was telling them, you can't do that. You have to come in person. You've got to bring tobacco to my house and offer me tobacco and request what you want to do, So this, is a good example of the changes that, we're facing today, And I hope, that I try to educate young people, when they ask, is this a proper way to do things? And I try to explain to them, this is how it's done. And I'm hoping the other people will pass on through generations of that. I want to talk a little bit about the Indigenous Day. Tomorrow in Lincoln, there's a big event taking place in the morning. If any of you can travel down there. Last year in August 2020, the legislature passed a bill 848 designating the second Monday in October as Indigenous Day. This has been long overdue. We as Native people have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's the first time we're getting some recognition that we are still here, and we always believe that ourselves, to other people, we are still here, we survived, we're here. With the COVID virus, which has affected all races, I look back at around 1800 when smallpox almost decimated the Omaha tribe. We were reduced to like 300, 400 people in northeast Nebraska. And today we roughly run a number around 7,000. So we've managed to survive, and all this, But tomorrow in Lincoln, they're going to honor Dr. Susan Peacock, who was the first Native American doctor and the first Native American woman to become a doctor in the United States. Her statue will be unveiled tomorrow morning. I'm taking part in the cedar ceremony, which I'm going to bless the statue and pray over the statue that for the public there. And like I said, any of you welcome to come down to the state capitol there for the event that's going to be taking place. And the 4 tribes will be there. They'll be also placing the 4 tribal flags at the state capitol for the first time too. So the state of Nebraska is finally realizing, how much history Native people have had in, contributing here to this great state. Just wanted to share that with you. And I think at this time we're going to have some music. during the second part, I'm going to save some time. If anybody's got any questions, I know a lot of times when I lecture, a lot of students say, we'd like to ask some questions, even do Native people still live in teepees yet? Which is a, legitimate question. No, we don't, but I'll save some time. Just want to briefly talk about some of my experiences that I've had, Even though I'm retired, Reverend Shari had talked about displaced children and missing Indian women and all this, with the court system here in Omaha, I serve as a qualified expert witness in Indian child welfare cases, both here in Douglas and Lancaster County. I get called every now and then, maybe like once every 6-8 months and all this, But a great number of our children are still in foster care yet. And there was one case which I was really concerned about. This young 9-year-old child was placed with a Black family, and he had been there for several years, and he was identifying himself as being Black. Now, when a child is being placed in foster care, they're supposed to try and, teach them about their culture and all this, and evidently he wasn't being taught about his culture, and he got lost in the process of who he was. He didn't know that he was Native American. And a lot of people who've been in foster care, have lost that identity. And I was previously telling you that we're losing our culture fast. So a lot of children who end up foster care are just lost in that process. But I every now and then I get called, and I testify every now and then. When I worked on the reservation, I worked in the area of mental health. And many of you have read some of the articles. We have a very high suicide rate, and it's due to the poverty that exists on the reservations. If you're familiar with the Pine Ridge Reservation, South Dakota, probably the poorest county in the whole United States. Even our reservation in Macy, we have poverty up there today. There's unemployment's really high. Housing is a problem. They provide some medical care there, but like I was saying, a lot of our young people are caught up in alcoholism and drugs. Meth has been a problem. It never used to be a problem. The alcohol was always a problem, but today meth has been introduced on a lot of reservation, which has taken its toll of many people, and other drugs that are abused too as well. But the virus has affected, we've lost a lot of tribal members, not only on the reservation here in the city of Omaha too, I'm going to share with you a personal, my illness with the virus. In last December, I came down with the virus. I was in the hospital at the VA. I'm a veteran, Vietnam veteran, and I was in there for 18 days. I had headaches and I couldn't breathe. I was on oxygen. And if anybody who's in the medical profession, I was on 30 liters of oxygen. And I was pretty sick, and nobody could come and see me, so I had very little contact with the outside world except through I try to text people and all this, Well, one day I asked the doctor, I had 2 doctors. One came in, and I said, "Doctor," I said, "what's my prognosis? How am I doing?" And he stood there and he looked at me for a long time. And he said, "If you get worse," he said, "we're going to put you on a ventilator." And I did not want to go on a ventilator. I'd rather, just go on than go on a ventilator. So he talked to me for a little while, and he left, and I laid there, and I thought, I'm going to pray, because I'd been praying every day, and I'm going to do a special prayer, So I closed my eyes. I was laying down. As I was praying, something told me to open up my eyes and look to the right. And I looked, and I saw a woman praying with her hands folded and her head bowed, and she had a veil coming down. And I thought, I don't want to interrupt her prayer, so I closed my eyes real quick, and I continued praying. And then as I finished, that person or whatever it wasn't there. But I got better after that. just, I consider it like a miracle or revelation or whatever it is, But I really believe in prayers, that God answers prayers. Because after that, I recovered miraculously. The doctor said, we've given you steroids, you're going to come down with diabetes. I never had diabetes, but I was diagnosed as being diabetic. But I lost like 15 pounds. And he said, if you keep your weight off and you exercise every day, we're not going to give you medicine for diabetes. So I've done that. And today, I walk every morning on the Keystone Trail in Northwest Omaha. It's a beautiful area there, the trees. I just talk to Mother Earth, when I walk, and it's such a beautiful time. I'm recovered. I thank God for that, Like I said, as Indian people, we have spirituality is a really important part of our lives. We never did have a religion per se. Religion was kind of left up to families and individuals and all this. But I remember my mother teaching us how to pray, at every meal and for different, like I said, we always start out with a prayer. But I wanted to share that with you in the church here today because, my faith in God is even much more stronger as I get older and all this, and that I'm just so grateful, that, I'm here today and all this, But I would like to answer any questions or concerns, I want to point out, John Papan's an excellent speaker too. He could come up here and do just as good job or even better than me. But I'm glad he's here today, and it's good to see him. And my friend Maria, she's a Yankton Sioux, and she lives here in Omaha, so it's always nice to see them. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer or... Okay. There's a question there. My hearing's not good, so you're going to have to talk loud. I don't want to get into that critical race theory, but as far as history goes, even when I was in high school or even in college, there was nothing taught about Native American history or even of my own people, here in the state. Today, a lot of states, where they have huge Indian population, they're trying to address this, and some states are resistant, to that. I think South Dakota is a good example of them not wanting to, teach Native American history in a lot of the schools, but, the educational system really needs to look at, what they're being taught, what they're teaching in grade school, high school, even college, Creighton did have a Native American Studies program. The chairman, who was a Jesuit priest of the department, and he was the director of the Native American Studies, he got sick. He was the one that hired me. I remember when he hired me, he said, "Rudy, God sent you to us," he said, But, and he had to leave. And I didn't know what was going to happen to me. The other professors that were from other interdisciplinary departments would teach a course and all this, And I stayed on for about a year, but after I left a year, they dissolved the Native American Studies program. But that's when, one area, like I said, a lot of the universities, I know UNO has a Native American Studies program, but our educational system, I think, has really lacked as far as, trying to have a lot of the, the history and background of a lot of Native American people, Because I was at a senior center last Friday, and the director said, "What holiday's coming up Monday?" And everybody said, "Columbus Day," they said. And me and another friend, we couldn't believe, that, well, they're probably not aware that Monday is now Indigenous Day here in the state of Nebraska, it's a holiday. But see, that's a good example of, what needs to be, shared, with the general population. That's a good question, yeah. Yes. Wait, I'm sorry, my hearing's like. You said that the Indian Center in Omaha does not exist anymore because there's no money. Exactly. Is there is anybody trying to work to get like private donations, or I guess the other thing is there's a clinic, with Indian Health Service mentioned on the estimate. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. John Papan, we sit on the mayor's advisory board here in the city of Omaha. That was a result, I don't know if you remember, 4 years ago, there was a Park Kiowa and Rosewood Indian that came through Omaha. He had some mental health issues, and he died as a result of the police brutality. But I know John has been, working, and John can probably answer that question because he's been trying to start up an Indian Center, and he knows some of the obstacles that we've faced here in Omaha. John, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
There have been Indian centers here since the early 70s. There was a few cultural organization or powwow clubs here in Omaha that my parents and others in the community have been part of. And there've been I'd say about 3 different Indian centers that have been here in the Omaha area. Yes, that's always been a concern for grant funding, federal, state, and whatnot. So it's always a challenge to keep that funding flowing. Recently, the Lincoln Indian Center had a struggle, and they were able to rally enough support from the community and others to keep the doors open over there. So it's a constant challenge for us in our community, but we're working to bring that together. And one of them is, of course, to recognize that we are intertribal. That is, we have many tribes, not just the 4 here in Nebraska, but we have a lot of different tribes. And so there's a challenge to bring unity together, but we're working on that. And I think that we have a lot of support out there from people like yourselves and others that want to help out. It's just a matter of coming together and moving forward on that. So we're constantly working on that, and hopefully we'll see something in the future here that we'll be able to have a place of our own, like my uncle used to say. Thank you. John. Sure. Yes. Yes, we have the Fred Leroy Clinic, which is run by the Ponca tribe, Northern Poncas of Nebraska, and then also the Nebraska Urban Indian Health Coalition, that they run a few programs at their location. But as far as cultural things, like we had a language program housed out of the UNO Community Engagement Center for a number of times. Of course, we had to suspend that because of COVID, but we hope to continue depending on Rudy's sister's health, and we don't have fluent speakers to teach, but we're hoping to continue that even through Zoom and other technologies to continue that. But yeah, they're there, and of course, it's been a challenge. COVID has really impacted the Native American community, so it's a big challenge for that. Any other questions or?
We have comments in the chat, not a question.
Okay.
But just, Mark says, I'm 1/8 Creek Indian, and I didn't even realize that there were so many Native Americans still in Omaha, and it was wonderful to hear from speakers and hope to see it more involved.
That's good to hear. And I think that a lot of people, they may have Native blood, but it's never acknowledged. I have a couple of people that I'm working with to kind of find out what tribe they're part of and if they choose to be enrolled and whatnot, because there's a lot of pride in acknowledging that, and I would encourage everyone to find out, because even people have adopted Native kids too, so it's important that they're in touch with the culture.
I wonder if I might ask the last question.
Sure.
I'd like to come back to our theme of relationship. I think the land acknowledgement is a good start, and we're going to keep using it. I'm wondering what else we as a congregation can do to build positive, mutually beneficial relationships with Native peoples without putting the burden on
Sure.
Indigenous peoples and heritage.
I think just recently we were looking for meeting space, to talk about issues in the Native community. And the church offered us meeting space here, which was very helpful. We've had a couple of dinners and whatnot, which I really appreciate, and I hope that that continues. And that's the other thing too. The community has a lot of issues to address, and some of them are being addressed, but not all of them. Because one of the things that's a big challenge is homelessness and housing for Native people. And of course, the language program, having a place for cultural events. So that's the goal in the future for a cultural center or a building. And then also for a place where a lot of, we can have funerals for our loved ones, because there really isn't a place. I mean, there's a couple of possibilities, that happens, but it would be nice to have our own place that we wouldn't have to share, because sometimes scheduling doesn't happen. So, but I would encourage anyone to volunteer through, upcoming events, and they have a powwow at the National Indian Education Conference is going to be on Friday, the 15th, from 6 to the 8, 9, 10 p.m. So that one's open to the public. You always know where the Chai Center is. So if you're wanting to, you can come in and attend.
Just one other quick thing, John had mentioned homelessness, when I came to Omaha, I used to drive down on Dodge Street. If you know where Burger King's at, probably maybe 6, 7 years ago, there used to be a place where you catch a bus, a little shelter there. A lot of the Native people who were homeless would congregate there. They would sleep in that area there. As Indian people, Native people, we never had the concept of homelessness. We always took in relatives, uncles, grandparents. We don't have cousins, but we'd call them brothers and sisters. There was no such thing as homelessness. But once you get in an urban area, and when you're on a lease, you got to sign a lease, and you got to designate what people are going to live there. And a lot of Indian people face this that come to the city of Omaha, that they can't have their relatives stay with them. So as a result, they end up on the streets. But this is a problem in a lot of cities for Native Americans right now, homelessness, If you want to help, we're trying to get this Big Elk statue at the riverfront development started. It's maybe some project that you all could, look at as far as trying to get that going, because we want to recognize and honor Chief Big Elk when they do that finishing touches on the riverfront development. But I enjoyed my talk here. I've got to meet some other people, so I'm glad to be here. Thank you for letting me be here and share some thoughts with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell and Mr. Papan as well. I think we have a little bit of closing music as we settle in with what we've heard. If you lit a chalice at home, I invite you to go ahead and extinguish it now. May we all be like the chickadee person, learning from others' experiences and listening to the wise ones. And let us, week upon week, acknowledge and honor that where we meet for worship as the First Unitarian Church of Omaha is the land of the Omaha Oto nations, and that Indigenous people in the greater community have become marginalized and made invisible. May we recognize their presence among us and work with them to resolve issues like poverty, displaced children, and the murdered and missing Indigenous women, MMIW. So may it be. Amen.